Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Thursday, February 3rd. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Moore. The Notre Dame game is in 212 days, the game against Michigan in 297 days. Wednesday was National Signing Day, and as expected, the Buckeyes added 2 players to their 2022 recruiting class, offensive lineman Carson Hinsman and defensive lineman Amari Abor. And just as Mark Giffler told you on yesterday's show, Kristen Miller did, in fact, end up signing with Georgia. So we'll you don't really need to do anything else. If you need to know more about National Signing Day, just go back and listen to yesterday's show again. Mark correctly predicted everything, so there you go. You're all you're all caught up on National Signing Day. Wednesday was also the first time that some of the early enrolling freshmen and a pair of transfers from out west met with the media since they arrived at Ohio State. My guest today is here to discuss some of the most interesting takeaways from those interviews. He is the great Tony Gerdeman. You can't see this. He has captioned himself on our recording thing. Tony Gerdeman, parentheses, frequent guest. No lies detected, as the kids say. Tony, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me, as always, Tom. It's always a joy, and sometimes when I'm not here for a span of a couple of weeks, I wonder where you are.
Get a little jealous. Is that Giffler? He's running around town with that Giffler again. Son of a gun. Chased me down the street with a rolling pin. Before we get to the freshmen, I did want to start with Tanner McAlister. He is a transfer safety from Oklahoma State. It sounds like he is kind of filling the role of player/coach right now, since he is one of the few people in the building with years of experience playing in a Jim Knowles defense. What did Tanner McAlister have to say?
Well, first time, I do call other podcasts, and I say, is Tom there? And they're all like, oh, he just left. It's a likely excuse. Tanner McAlister, and this is something that Jim Knowles hinted at as well, but Tanner McAlister comes in with 3 years of starting experience in this defense, 4 years of playing in it, and so he is kind of gathering people around the learning tree and discussing what the defense is. And we talked a few days ago about how he can also explain how Jim Knowles reacts and how loudly he can coach at times, even though C.J. Hicks at one point today said, yeah, he's kind of a laid-back dude. That will eventually change, and a guy like Tanner McAlister will be able to explain, well, this is why he's not so laid-back anymore. But yeah, the ability to teach before they're even really doing anything, to help players, and not just the safeties, but anybody in this defense who has a question about it, because this is a guy who's seen it all, he hasn't played it all, but he's been in it long enough to understand what everybody's role is and knows it well enough to explain the whys, the hows, the purposes of each defense. And like Jim Knowles said on Monday, he's a coach out on the field, and he's also a coach off the field for the guys watching film or doing whatever. Just questions. He's got answers.
And he had answers to another question, which was, the Leo position is obviously remember when the bullet was the thing that everyone asked about all the time because it was the new and shiny position? Well, guess what? Now it's the Leo position. So let's talk about the Leo position. McAlister was asked about, you obviously have played in this defense. You kind of know what Jim Knowles is looking for. And, we've heard a bunch of names, and, Jack Sawyer's name is always the first one that comes up whenever anyone talks about the Leo position. But he actually had a different guy in mind, Tanner McAlister did, when he was asked about it. A name that maybe you'd heard before, but it was kind of like, okay, that's really interesting that he thinks that too.
Yeah, and that name was Cale Stover, and that's somebody that we've talked about as being that kind of size and demeanor and athleticism. So it was good to hear a player familiar with the defense share that same thought, and it kind of further confirms that Cale Stover really wants to play defense. And Ryan Day talked about that on Monday, where they have their 5 tight ends now. They don't necessarily need Cale Stover to come back. So now you got to figure out what he is. And with the sheer number of linebackers on this defense for really only 2.5 spots, you're going to need other of these guys to get a look at that Leo. And I would agree, Cale Stover being that 6'4", 250-pound guy with the athleticism and the tenacity that he has. And we saw how quickly he was able to pick up defense again after playing 2 years at tight end. Jim Knowles needs on Monday, you need to be intelligent and you need to be reckless and some other things in there. But all of these labels and these traits that Jim Knowles is putting out there, Cale Stover can check off each of those, because like you're able to pick up defense in a week to play against Michigan. Now, granted, it was only a couple of snaps, but then also you started in the Rose Bowl at linebacker after practicing just a few weeks and really not practicing much before Michigan. So he can pick stuff up. And now, and I've seen Jim Knowles talk about the Leo position in the past and in years before, where he said you don't have to learn a lot or know a lot. You just have to be able to understand your keys and then just have essentially no fear. And Cale Stover doesn't seem like a scared player to me.
No, he was in high school, was a running back, which is a position where you do see a good bit of contact, and also a pretty darn good safety, which is another position where you see a good bit of contact. So, yeah, he does not seem like the type that scares particularly easily. Another one of those guys who's in that mix at linebacker, who probably not at Leo, is Chip Traynham. He is the other transfer in addition to McCallister in the class. He's an Ohio native who transferred in from Arizona State. He is moving from running back to linebacker. But what's interesting there was he wasn't necessarily planning to be a linebacker when he first entered the portal.
Yeah, he was just apparently ready to leave Arizona State and figure out what his next step was. And one of the things he said was, I always bet on myself. And it kind of like when I joined LinkedIn when it first came out. What do you do? Doesn't matter. I'll do whatever. I bet on myself. And that's a lot like what Chip Traynham did. Well, is he a linebacker? Is he a running back? Doesn't matter. I'm just going to go in the portal. Whatever happens, it'll take care of itself. And then he said he had people from back home, his coaches from back home at Hoban, saying, who have always kind of told him defense might be what you're best at. And hearing him talk about he's had that in the back of his head for the last couple of years is exactly what Steel Chambers has said about, I kind of thought about it. I always had it in the back of my mind. And then Steel Chambers, even at the Rose Bowl, was like, I didn't really like offense. And it's like, well, it was your decision, essentially. And yet now, so here you have Chip Traynham coming back to Ohio, to his stomping grounds. And again, I don't know where all of these guys are going to play, what his role is going to be in this defense. I don't know if I don't know exactly how he fits into it, but we know Jim Knowles went after him, and Ryan Day went after him. And knowing you've got so many people at a linebacker position, or you're over the 85 number by 7 or so right now, you're not just bringing in people to like collect them. Like, you have to have a plan. You've got some ideas for them, so I'm interested to see what those become in the spring.
Yeah, that linebacker room is going to be a fascinating thing to watch shake out, because you have so many new faces, and guys who left last year. One of them was Dallas Gant. He actually just announced on Wednesday that he was transferring to Toledo. That is now final. We had just mentioned him recently on one of the other shows that it was still kind of up in the air where he would go. He is headed to Toledo. Another guy who is going to be in that linebacker room this year is C.J. Hicks, and he is a true freshman, obviously, and came in with a tremendous amount of hype. And I'm sure the expectations for him are going to be way out of line with reality from a lot of the fan base. But, one of the interesting questions that you always get was centered around C.J. Hicks. It was, whenever you get a new group of freshmen on campus, it's, who are the leaders who are emerging in that group? You can just color me extremely unsurprised that C.J. Hicks sounds like he is taking something of a leadership role already. And that was true even with guys who aren't even enrolled yet.
Well, and this is a guy who, while he was being recruited, was recruiting other players and was known as Captain Buckeye, even as a recruit. And so it's not a surprise that has continued now that he is here and enrolled early, helping lead workouts. And, he's not necessarily a hometown guy, but he is from Ohio. And so he helps in that way as well for some of the out-of-state guys. But a well-rounded person who is able to handle things and then can help other players through that and wants to. And that's one of the things where he's doing this actively. And some guys just, they eventually, they need a couple of years before they're like, you know what? It turns out people are following me. Like, some guys do it early. Like, I think Devin Brown, we'll probably talk about him, is going to be one of those guys. And a lot of times it was Kyle McCord last year, where it's the quarterbacks. But CJ Hicks, one of those guys who has rallied the guys from back when they were juniors in high school. What I also liked is he said, like, don't give me all of the credit. Like, it's not my group chat. I'm not responsible for anybody else's relationships with other people. Like, I do what I do, and then everybody else does their own thing as well. Like, he has put in his work, but I like that he's also giving credit to other people for. He's not taking credit for anything, really, and everybody knows, like, he's put a lot of work into this. Coaches will give him credit, but he's more concerned about everybody just getting the most out of the situation right now.
Yeah, and that's true of not just the guys who are already on campus, but even some of the guys who are summer enrollees. He talked about the fact that Hero Canoe, defensive tackle, who is signed in December, announced later in January, but he's officially in the class. Sonny Styles, who also signed back in December, he's also showing up over the summer. Those guys were both on campus in Columbus last weekend, not to stay, just to kind of visit. And Hicks said he spent time going through with them. Here's the stuff we're doing. Here's how you got to do this stuff. So start getting those guys ready. Well in advance of them even showing up. So it's not just even the, he's the leader in the the certain group in the weight room that goes in at a certain time. It's like, no, he is taking that role with basically the entire class, it sounds like. So Hicks, by the way, is starting at the will linebacker spot. That's where he's, not starting, not like he's going to have a starting job waiting for him, but that is where he's beginning his college career, is at the will linebacker spot. I will correct myself before we get a bunch of questions in the comments. That's not a big surprise, I don't think, for anyone who was figuring out where guys might slot in. But that was official as of when he talked on Wednesday, or at least as official as things get in February. Another guy in the defense who there have been big expectations for is defensive lineman Caden Curry. And I am always a little nervous. We did a bold prediction show about the freshmen, and it was like, I'm expecting big things from Caden Curry this fall. And every time we do one of those, and you put numbers out there, I always get a little nervous that it's like, this is, an 18-year-old, and I don't want to, be putting a ton of pressure on this person as they're just starting this next step in their journey. And then Caden Curry was asked about who he wants to be like, or who he wants to play like, in the Ohio State defensive line room, and it was like, oh, okay. When he had that answer, I was like, okay, good, then I'm not the one putting the pressure on him. That's all coming from him, then that's fine.
Yeah, he said he patterns his game after Nick Bosa, and if you're going to pattern your game after somebody, he's not a bad guy to do it. And, Tom, I'm not as fearful as you. A while back, I said he kind of reminded me of Nick Bosa and John Simon. So if he doesn't live up to that, that's not my fault. That's his fault for not doing so. But what is interesting is there is a comparison there to be made with Nick Bosa, because Nick Bosa is not the tallest guy. He's probably 6'2", 6'3", a lot like Caden Curry. Nick Bosa as a freshman, maybe even as a sophomore, certainly as a freshman, was starting at defensive tackle at St. Thomas Aquinas. Caden Curry began his career as a defensive tackle. Just really a constant fighter, really, really quick off the ball. And that's the same with Nick Bosa. And a guy who will start as a defensive end at Ohio State, but could move inside with the freshman package. We saw Nick Bosa do that as a true freshman. So there are some similarities there. But it was interesting that Caden Curry said he's a little light right now, wants to get up to 265 before spring. He's at about 215 right now. He's added about 5 or 6 pounds since he got to Columbus. And that's something I've always said about him since the first time I saw him 2 years ago, is he's listed at like 6'4", 250 or something like that, 260 on the recruiting sites. And it's like, he's not that. He's shorter than that, and he's probably, when I saw him, he was probably 6'2", 240. But he was, like I said, strong, fast as heck, dominating on the interior, able to block punts and return them for touchdowns from the inside, and really unblockable, and only got better and was able to move outside and keep all of that speed, athleticism, and the tenacity.
All right, we are contractually obligated to talk about the quarterback anytime we talk about a recruiting class. So, all right, let's talk about Devin Brown. You mentioned him earlier. Everyone has different stuff they do to get themselves prepared for college. But there was something that he did last year that's a little different that might help him be a little more ready than he might otherwise have been to live across the country from where he grew up. Explain what that was.
Yeah, and he played his first few years of high school football in Arizona, and then went and lived with a host family in Utah for his senior year of high school football. And so he said on Wednesday, like, yeah, a lot of kids from far away or even, 2 hours away or whatever can get homesick if they can't get to see their family. But he went through that already, didn't really bother him. So he doesn't see himself as one of these West Coast guys that will get homesick. And every time we see him talk, whether it's this or interviews from football camps or whatever, just really mature, but not a robot. And a lot of these quarterback camp guys can sometimes be robotic, and he's got a personality. So that's why a lot of teammates like him, and why he's able to lead and go to a new high school as a senior and fit right in. And so he's an experience. He's more mature than maybe your typical freshman enrolling early, but also recognizes this is CJ Stroud's offense and team. So he just kind of needs to learn, do what is asked of him, and try to improve each day. But just another interesting guy who has, like I said, a lot of personality. Some call him goofy. He said he's always been kind of a goofy, awkward guy, but certainly has added some athleticism and a dynamite throwing arm.
And he had maybe some inside information about what it's like to be an Ohio State football player before he became an Ohio State football player, because his former high school coach was also a former Ohio State quarterback. His name was Joe Germain. You may remember him from such games as the 1997 Rose Bowl and such and such. So, Tony, what did he have to say? What did Devin Brown have to say about his old coach, Joe Germain?
Yeah, he was asked if Joe Germain steered him to Ohio State, and he said, of course, he was always a little biased towards Ohio State, and why wouldn't he be? It was where he's from, and he had some great experiences there, but he just wanted the best for him. And, wherever that turned out to be, Joe Germain was going to be supportive of him, but obviously choosing Ohio State made his old head coach very happy. He did say it was interesting to walk around the halls and see pictures of your old high school coach on the walls from some really great moments in Ohio State history. But I know Joe Germain is certainly happy that Devin Brown is a Buckeye now. And, he came about it on his own, and it wasn't something where a high school coach strong-armed him into it or anything like that. It's just he made the best decision for what he thought his future held.
And he was originally committed to USC, and that was during the Clay Helton days, and then he flipped to Ohio State. And boy, things have changed at USC since he flipped to Ohio State. And he, basically said, like, it feels like things have worked out for the best. So that was that is a very, very different path if you're going to USC all of a sudden, and now Caleb Williams is there and Lincoln Riley's there. That's a very different quarterback room and quarterback situation than you might have thought you were walking into. So, and thanks again to Tony for joining me. Always appreciate having him on, even as frequently as we do. Tony and I, if you like hearing Tony and I talk about football and the Buckeyes and Buckeye football, you can hear the Buckeye Weekly podcast. We just dropped a new episode of that on Wednesday, when it looked like Jim Harbaugh was going to be leaving Michigan to head to the Minnesota Vikings. And then late Wednesday evening, Adam Schefter had a report that, in fact, Jim Harbaugh is coming back to the Michigan Wolverines and not the Minnesota Vikings. So, may you live in interesting times. It should be a fun listen for you. And if that's not your thing, we will have a whole new episode coming out a little later on this week, along with talking about some of the Ohio State freshmen we just talked about, and some bold predictions for them, what they may do this fall. And now that Caden Curry has calmed himself to Nick Bosa, I'm going to feel a little less concerned about, predicting him and putting the restrictor plate on what those predictions might be. So that should be a fun show as well. You can find Buckeye Weekly along with all of our other great podcasts like the Big Me Kickoff, Gives in the Bank, Around the Oval. You can find those all wherever you listen to the Morning Scoop. Just search Buckeye Scoop to find all of those. You can subscribe right there. Leave us a 5-star rating and review as well, which helps other folks find those shows, and which we do truly appreciate. And if you like watching us on YouTube, all those shows are also on YouTube, youtube.com/Buckeye Scoop. If you're there, hit that thumbs up button. That will help other folks find these shows on YouTube. And also hit that bell. That will help you find these shows on YouTube, because you get notified every time we post a new show. So a new podcast, new player and coach interview, high school highlights, camp highlights, you name it. It's all there at youtube.com/Buckeye Scoop. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.